Hi again, this is Helen from Utopia, and this is video number 4 in the tutorial series of Make Chook Sculpture. So in this video I'm going to show you how to add beaks and tails and combs and wattles. Yes, these are called wattles, I didn't know that, I had to look it up. So there's lots of different ways, and this is really how you can add your own flair to your sculpture and really make it unique. So I will show you a few different ways, but of course it is limitless and you might come up with your own ideas. So first of all, I'm going to start by showing you how to do it with wire and add-on pieces of wire. Now you would do this at this stage after you've made your wire armature. So this comes before you put your S&S coating on. So what we do is we use our spare piece of wire that you'll find in your kit, and you can cut out of some cardboard some shapes, something like this. So I pre-made these. I just kind of figured out what I wanted to do, and I cut out these shapes to make the little add-on pieces. Then I will get my piece of wire, and I'll just do the comb. I'll show you the comb first. So this is quite a small piece of wire that you need for this. So I'll just use my scissors to chop up a bit. You can see how easy it is to chop with scissors. If you don't have a good pair of scissors that cut through the wire, you can just use little wire cutters. Even jewellery ones will work, but you just need to snip each piece of wire separately. Okay. So once you've cut a piece of wire, at least more than doubles the size of your add-on, what you do is you fold it round. You fold it round your cardboard shape like that, and then pull up the ends, the sides, like that. So you've got this flange that's quite large. You probably don't need it to be that big, but you can sort of see what I'm doing here. That will attach to the head like that. All right. So before you do that, you fold your wire around the shape. Okay, so where it's gone in like that, I'm going to have to use my tools to make that indentation going between the combs. So you can see now that wire is hugging that piece of cardboard. And then I've got my flange here on the bottom, which is way too big. So I'm going to chop a bit of that off. Chop, chop, chop. Okay, so we've got that little comb piece now. And that can attach to the head like that. Okay? And you do that by tying on with the wires. So working with the curve of the head. You can just tuck that around like that. And then use your small tying wires, as we did in the instructional video number 1. Just to, I've got to put my glasses on for this because I can't see. Put it through like that, catch it, and do a twist. Just maybe sew that on in 3 or 4 places. And that's one way of doing it. Then when you come to the S&S, you would S&S all that in. And that's then that will become a really firm place to do your mosaic work. So with the tail, same, you would close that tail off, and you would wrap your wire around that shape like we did with the other one. I'm not going to do this. You've seen how I did it with the comb. It did exactly the same. Make the flange, tuck it all around, and then you would sew it on into position there. Okay, so that's one way of doing tails and combs and beaks and things like that. Wattles. You can do it all like that if you want. With the beak, you might, if you were doing the, you could actually make the beak in with the sculpture. I have to reopen this head for this. So while you're making the sculpture, you can even just use your newspaper instead of scrunching, I'm going to make the shape of the beak with the newspaper. It's a little pointy shape. And put it in there. And I want a rather pronounced beak. And wrap the wire around it. Looks more like a duck now, doesn't it? And make it like that. So that's another way of doing beaks. Okay. So that's sort of how you do it when you're still in the wire armature stage. When you're in the S&S stage, you can see we left this wire here. You can add on to that. If you wanted to get real creative with your wire, you can make a wire tail, again with some of this leftover wire. Don't forget with your finished sculpture, you don't have to mosaic the whole thing. You can leave areas of interest, like the tail, just with wire, because wire is quite an interesting sculptural medium in itself. So I could attach more wire to that tail, like that, again using my small wire ties to attach it. I could make some really fabulous wire tail feathers just by doing this. I could attach 3 or 4 of those, and that could be a tail. You don't have to do everything mosaic, just leave it like that. Spray paint it if you want to paint a different colour, or just not even spray paint, just get some enamel paint and daub it on, and it could be quite an effective tail like that. So if you've got to this stage, this is the, I showed you this in the previous video, where we used S&S as a modelling compound, and we made this really nice comb, and we finished off the tail like that, and we made a beak. So that's another option. The other option is, what I've done is to create those features with mosaic pieces, which is an awful lot of fun. I love working with China. That's just one of my favourite mediums. Of course, you can mosaic your chook in any medium you want, but these plate edges do make really effective tail feathers. And the wattles I've made with edges of this platter, and on the corners I cut these off and made wattles. I did use the edges for the beak, and I cut a cup handle for this. So I'll show you those cuts in the next video. But just for some ideas, have a rummage around all your old ceramic things, because sometimes you find things, like this was like a cookie jar of a lady, and you can see her little feet there. That might make a perfect beak if I could cut that out in one piece. So really have a look at things and think about them in another way. There's always more than one use for everything in the world, so you can get a bit creative like that. I tricked you with this sculpture. I was hoping it would look finished, but when you spin it around, I haven't done the other side, so I can use this as an instructional video. So what I do want to do in this video is show you these tail feathers. I'm not going to show you how to cut them. I'll show you how to cut them in the next video, but I want to show you how to assemble them. I forgot to grab my gloves, so I'll just grab a pair of gloves. Just talk amongst yourselves. You can talk to the cameraman. He's a good cameraman, isn't he? Okay, I've got my gloves, because of course, as you know, we need to wear gloves when working with our S&S. Now what I have in here is a tub of S&S, which I mixed up an hour ago, and I coloured it with Artopia's wonderful artistic tints. I used orange. We're not including a tint in this particular kit because you only need it if you're going to colour the S&S or colour your grout. And you know, you might choose red pieces or green pieces or whatever. So, but these are available at Artopia. You can go online and buy some of those. Wonderful colours, wonderful versatile product. And you can see I've coloured the S&S, and this has been sitting here for about an hour, so it's nice and chunky. And I have like I said, pre-cut these, and I've also used my Dremel to smooth off so they're no longer sharp, because obviously you don't want sharp pieces sticking out. I will talk about that in the next video. So first of all, I'll just get an idea of where these pieces are going. This one's going to go like this. Then that one will come next. But I am going to pop this little one under here to support the others. So I'll stick that one on first. So this S&S is nice and thick, and I can just blob it on. It's almost the modelling stage. And that's a really good consistency to stick these pieces on, because you don't want to use it when it's fresh. It won't grip enough and the pieces will slide. So you can see that's just holding nicely like that. So then the first piece in the tail feather I'm going to put on like that. And I'm going to get a lot of S&S and really pile that up. And the reason I'm using it coloured is because I do want it to be a little bit invisible. If I didn't colour it, you would see the white through. So it's in effect, it's sort of constructing and grouting all in one hit. So that piece can go on there. You can see I'm really overdoing it with the S&S, because I can always take that off later, but at the moment I just want it to make a nice bond. So I call it the wobble test. If you touch things and they wobble, you know you haven't got enough on there. They seem to be nice and firm. This one is going to go on top. So I'm going to really overdo it with the S&S again. And nestle that into position. Sometimes you have to move it around a bit until you get it into a position where you think it's going to sit right. And I'm just going to smooth off that at this point with my finger. I'll leave that because the next piece is going there. Sometimes you can't do the whole tail construction in one go. If I wasn't showing you in the video, I'd leave it at that for now, and I would actually let that set, and I'd pop back and just make sure it hasn't been sliding. Just keep popping it back into place, or even put a bit of masking tape around it. Just for the sake of the video, I will put the next piece on, with risk of it all falling off, but I don't think it will. It should be okay. Put that like that. You can see how it's a really effective way of creating something quite unique and quite fun too. And here you can see how things are happening here too. I might come back later and pop some more in the middle like that, but this one I did design it to go there, and I think I'm at the point where I better not continue, but I would stick that there when this lot has dried. So that just gives you some ideas of how to use the china to make the tail feathers with the S&S coloured with the Artopia tints. You see it's really fun. I just love this effect. I think it's really fun. So that's and the rest I'll show you in video number 5, which is more about cutting and different cuts for your mosaics and the comb and things like that. So thank you for listening to video number 4, and stay tuned for tutorial video number 5.